Hey everybody, Adam here with WhipWorks, and this is the WhipWorks How to Make a Bullwhip series, where I show you how to make a professional quality paracord bullwhip. The 6-plat layer has a lot fewer materials than our core that we just went over, so all you're gonna need is some paracord, athletic tape. You could use athletic tape, but I use vinyl tape as well. This vinyl tape does not go in the body of the whip, so don't worry, because vinyl tape will degrade over time, and artificial sinew. That's it. 4 materials go into the 6-plat layer. Now, without a further ado, let's get plaiting with our 6-plat layer. First step of the 6-plat layer is to measure our paracord. So I like to use black paracord for all of my inner layers, just because whenever I order paracord, I order a ton of black, and I just use that for my 6 and 10-plat layers. Except for white whips, or very lightly colored whips, I'll use white paracord for my 10-plat layer so that black paracord doesn't show through the super light paracord. But anyways, so I need to cut my strands. 2 strands at 50 inches, according to our blueprint. And I like to give it an extra ½ inch, 50½ inches, just to be safe. And then I know that this strand is 50 inches, so I'll just pull it along. Get them at the same length. All right, and then for the 6-footer, I also need 4 at 58 inches. All right. So to start our 6-plat layer, we're gonna start with, I do vinyl tape here. And this tape is not going to be in the body of the whip. It's only going to be in the, we're gonna trim it off. So I'm gonna trim about 2½, 3-inch strip here. That might be too long, but that's okay. So I'm gonna place it face up, and I'm gonna use these 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold it in place. Now we're going to take our 6 strands, but we're gonna start with those four longer strands, those 4, let me turn to the right. We're gonna start with those 4 strands that are at 58 inches, and we're going to very gently place them in position here. Now this vinyl tape is strong, but it's not super strong, so you gotta be very gentle here. And I like to kind of adjust the paracord, have it balancing so that it'll stay. We just wanna keep it nice and in place. And then I'll grab my other 2 strands, and I'm gonna go 1 on either side. So what we're doing here is, no matter what plaiting layer we're doing, we want an equal amount of the same length of strand on each side. So as you'll see here, we have 1 of our shortest strands on each side and 2 of our longer strands on each side. So I wrap this vinyl tape over the top of it like this, and then I'll take one of my 1, 2, 3 blocks, and I'll place it here. And I'll take a vise, and I'll get this firmly in place. There we go. And once that's firmly in place, we can work with it here. Okay. So as I was saying, we have 2 of our longest strand on each side and 1 of our shorter strands on each side. Now, we need to plait a diamond pattern into this to get it started, to give it some structure. So what I like to do, I take my right inside strand, and I go over my left inside strand. And this is our first kind of plait, this over here. Then we're gonna take our next left side strand, and we're gonna go over, just like that. Then our next right side strand, we're gonna go under, over. Our next left, under, over, and our next right, over, under, over. And that's the beginning of our pattern. And then we clip it in place and we can work with it later. Now we've got our wrapped core, our bolstered core, and our new diamond Plat starter here, 6 Plat starter. So I'm gonna grab another, like a 2-inch strip of vinyl tape here. I'm gonna stick it on the left side, or whatever side is more comfortable for you. Now I'm going to place this, remove the clip so it's out of the way. I'm gonna place this so the tape is right above the end of the whip here. And then I'm gonna create a cone shape, and I'm gonna wrap this tape around it. See if that makes sense from the back and from the front. Ugh, get my hand out of the way here. So you're kind of left with this shape here. And I'm gonna keep wrapping it nice and tight here. Now, to start this pattern, you have to look for the strand that is already going over. So we're gonna look for the top strand, right? So it can either be this strand or this strand. And this strand is gonna go over this. So that's our first Plat. Now, this strand will go over this strand. And that's our second Plat. And then on this side, that next strand will go over. And on this side now, there's 2 strands, so it's gonna go under, over. And same on this side again, under, over. And over, under, over. So we continue that diamond pattern for our first section. Now that we've got 3 plats done, I like to get just this vinyl taped section really snug into the vise here. And I note that I'm keeping these diamond plats centered. And this will be a big deal as you're plaiting, is keeping everything nice and centered. Now, we have to figure out which strand is going to go next. Well, this one goes over. This right moving strand went over. So our next Plat is going to be the top left strand that's going to go over this strand, like this. And instead of continuing with the diamond Plat, I'm gonna switch to a 6 Plat. And this is a little confusing. I'm gonna go over 1, or under 1, over 2 when I'm plaiting with the left facing strands, or when I'm pulling through the right side. And then with my right facing strands, as I'm pulling through the left side, I'm going to do under 2 over 1. So I'm going to continue that pattern throughout here. So under 1 over 2, under 2 over 1, under 1 over 2, under 2 over 1. And then I like to give these a snug, and I'll push the handle up here to kind of make sure that it's nice and snug here. I'll kind of hand tighten everything. And then I just keep plaiting down the body of the whip here. So I'm gonna vise in this handle here and get a more secure grip on it. I like to use a scrap piece of leather, and I like to wrap my whip in it to get it in the vise so that it just kind of reduces the wear and tear on the whip itself as it's being tightly, you know, placed in the vise. So I've plaited down here, and now I'm gonna measure from the end of the steel rod down the length of our whip, and you'll see that it is 22 inches right here, and then we have the 6 strands just past that. And you could go a little bit, you could go 22.5 inches. It's not a huge deal, but I do like to keep it, you know, relatively accurate. So now I'm going to trim these strands to the sizes that are specified on my chart here. And I have them on my blueprint. I have them so it goes 2, 6, 10 all on the left side, and 4, 8, 12 all on the right side. And so we'll take our shortest strand on the left. We know that'll be 2. And for the 6 plat layer on a 6 footer, we know that the other 2 strands are the same length, so it doesn't matter. So we need one at 6 inches. And I like to add an extra 1/2 inch just to be careful here. And I like to trim these at a bias so that the paracord is cut at an angle like that. And then it just encourages an even better taper. And again, I like to go an extra 1/2. And then for the right side, we need 4, 8, 12. So I'll take the shortest strand. That's the one that's going to be 4. And I should slow down a little bit. I don't want this all to come undone here, since it's only being held by a clip at the moment. And then we'll go 8 and 12. Now, we need to bind this. So I'm going to take my artificial sinew, and I'm going to start here, by tying it maybe 1.5 inches above where I've trimmed. Here, we need to this out just a little bit so you can see better. Okay, so about 1.5 inches, 2 inches above. I'm just gonna tie a simple knot there, and again, we're gonna wrap it around itself and it will hold itself in place. And I like to wrap this inside the grooves that are created in between the plats of paracord. And I like to start with every single groove, and then I'll skip to every other groove. And then when we get down to where the strands are dangling, I'll go back to every single strand. And what I do now is I'm just gonna kind of bunch these up, and I'm just gonna wrap it like this. Nice and firm here. And we'll do maybe like 5 to 8 passes, just enough to really get it strong and in place. And then what I like to do is remove my clip, and I'm gonna tug on each of these strands. And I'll even give the sinker cord a good tug. Cool. And then we're gonna do the thing that we've done. We're gonna take our piece of Kevlar string or your extra piece of artificial sinew, and we're gonna stick this in, and the loop is kind of down on the bottom here. And then we're just gonna wrap this around itself. And we're gonna go more loose this time, so there's a further gap between these. It's not as close as it was when we were getting that initial tight section. They're gonna be further apart, just so they're less taut. We don't want it to be too stiff. We wanna keep a nice, smooth transition. And we'll go like 5 or 6 times, and I like to do 1 extra loop at that top one. And then we'll do what we've done several times here. going to kind of like going through the eye of the needle, sewing the eye in the needle here, or whatever that's called. That's not called sewing, that's looping it through, I don't know. And then give it a tug, and there you go. It's self-locked. And now we can take this off of our vise, and we need to give this a roll before we move on to the next bolster step. All right, so here's how I roll my whips. It's very simple. I have this, this is broken, but this is a piece of granite cutting board. And then I have another cheap cutting board that I got, and I have this 1/16 inch neoprene rubber stuck onto it. So this grips the whip while I am rolling it. And I just do this, boop-a-doop. And I only roll through the plaited portions of the whip. I don't roll the, the dangly bits that we're about to plait over. We have our freshly rolled 6 Plat layer here. Now we're gonna stick it in our vise. And we're gonna stick it in about the middle of the vise here. And then we are going to bind it. Now on my 8-footers and longer, at this point, I will take a 2-inch thick piece of rug liner and wrap the transition in that. But for 7-footers, 6-footers below, I don't do, actually no, for 6-footers I do use this, the 2-inch piece of bolster, of rug liner. But for 6-footers and below, I do not, because you don't want the transition to be too stiff on shorter whips. You want the transition to be as stiff as the length of the whip demands it to be. So here we go. I'm just gonna tie this on like we've done before. Gonna let it, let's get this up one here. Yeah, get it around there. Let it lock to itself as we tie it down here. And again, I like to start on every groove, and then we're gonna move to every other groove. And this is just to save time. You could go every groove all the way down, especially as you're getting to know this process. I'd probably recommend going every groove. And once we get to 1 inch before the transition, which is right now, we're at 9 inches here. I'm gonna go every groove again. I should have just gone every groove to make it less confusing for you. I have all these little superstitious whipmaker things that I do that I don't need to pass on. So we're going to every groove here, up past the transition just a little bit. And once we've gone past the transition several passes, I'm gonna find that 10-inch point so that I know, so where my finger is exactly where the steel rod transitions into the loaded sinker cord, and then you have everything else over the top of it that we have put there so far. And I'm gonna go back, and just like we did with just the core, I'm gonna wrap a bunch around that 10-inch mark, around that transition point, because that is the weak point of our whip, and we really need to support it because there's going to be a lot of strain on that single point of the transition. And you know, I'm just kind of passing around looking for spots that I haven't put the artificial sinew yet. And let me make sure, yeah, we look pretty centered there. Let me get one more pass on this little section that I kind of missed. Couple more passes. And then we're gonna go back we're gonna get back into our every groove, and we're gonna go further down. Now, if you look at the blueprint, I don't have exact measurements of where to start and where to stop binding, but if you eyeball it, I have artificial sinew stopping before the loaded section of the core ends. So you're gonna stop about, so we're loaded 8.5 inches into the core. So we're gonna stop at maybe 6 inches or so. And I kind of like to do this, I like to do this tapered pattern with it. So I'll go every groove. I went every groove, then I switched to every other groove. And I'll do that 3 times, and then I'll go every third groove. And I'll do that maybe 3 or 4 times. Again, I can see here, this is where our loaded section stops. So, I'll do this one, and that's where I want to end it. Now I'm gonna do the same deal that I did with just the loaded core. I'm gonna flip it 180 degrees. And now this time I'm not gonna do that X pattern. This time, going back, I'm just gonna go every third, doing like a barbershop spiral, like a DNA kind of spiral, just all the way down. All the way back to that transition point. And as I'm getting close to that transition point, I like to fill in the gaps a little bit more. So you can see I've got it tightly bound, more loosely bound, loosest bound, all the way up there. So it's like a nice taper, so it's the most taut near the transition, and it's less so, all the way down. And then at this transition, again, I like to really give that transition section some loving. Make sure it's really well bound. Excuse me. And I look if there are any sections that look like they could use a wrap so that you have that nice transition from most tightly bound to looser and looser and looser bound. You don't want a section that's tightly bound and then a section that's really loosely bound and then a section that's really tightly bound, because you'll get a weird kink in the rollout of your whip. You want a nice, smooth transition all the way down the whip. And then let me just find that 10-inch mark, make sure, yeah, that looks pretty good. Let me just do one more here. There we go. Cool. And then we're gonna wrap it. We're gonna go up and we're gonna go back down to where we started. And then we're gonna do our favorite thing. We're gonna take that piece of extra artificial sinew or Kevlar string in my case, rather. And we're just gonna wrap it at every groove up maybe, 5 times on each side, 6 times on each side, just to really get it nice and tight in there. And one final wrap. I like to hold it down with this finger, trim it, loop it through like a so, hold it tight, and boom, self-locked, baby. And trim that extra, loud noises. And then I'll take my athletic tape and we're gonna give this a wrap. And now you can see, again, I don't have it exactly marked on the blueprint where to end the athletic tape, but if you kind of eyeball it, I have it going just past where the loaded section of the core ends. So it's gonna go to like there-ish of tape. So I'm just gonna roll this up here. Kind of get this spiral going. You wanna make sure that the tape is always overlapping itself. You don't want a section that, here, let's see if I can. You don't want a section like this, where like the tape doesn't overlap itself and you can see underneath it. You want it to, I can fix this. You want it to overlap itself all the way down the body of the whip. Okay, now I can turn this back down. It's a little hot light. All the way down, and now I can feel, so we're going past I can see rather, we're going past the artificial sinew, and I can feel now, all right, so this is where the loaded section of the core. Sorry, I have to go back because I wasn't following my own advice. We're getting past the core, and we're just going to wrap around that. And I like to do an extra pass right at that transition point where it goes from the loaded section to the unloaded section. And then give it a trim. Boom. And now I'm gonna give this a roll. Really the only section that matters for me to roll is this center piece here where there's a bit of a bulge because we wrapped it extra times with our artificial sinew. So I'm gonna go give that a roll, and then we'll move on to the 10 plat layer. There you had it. You did your first plaiting with your 6 plat layer, and next up will be our 10 plat layer. If you have any questions about the techniques or anything we went over in this video, please feel free to comment down below. I'm gonna try and answer as many of those questions as I can. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And if you want more whip-related content, feel free to subscribe. And as always, happy cracking.